Okay, we are now live. I mute myself on YouTube here. Okay, so welcome everybody to our Tuesday afternoon live stream. This week I'm your host, Dana Morningstar, and with me is the lovely and talented Angie Atkinson. Angie, welcome.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
We're happy to have you. And oh, real quick, for those of you that are new here, just kind of an FYI, if you want to be notified when Angie and I do these live streams, you can subscribe to both of our YouTube channels. You can find Angie over at Angie Atkinson on YouTube and across the internet. Um, and you can also sign up for our text services. So you can sign up by texting the words Angie Live, all one word, to the number 33222 and or Dana Live, all one word, to the number 22999. So with that, I guess we'll just hop into it. We were thinking about discussing the topic of gaslighting today. Kind of what is it, how it happens, and then some of the results from it, and how to move forward after experiencing it. So, Angie, I guess, what have you seen in terms of gaslighting? What are your thoughts about it?
Well, maybe we should start by just defining gaslighting for
Okay,
people
sure.
who don't know. So I think, it's a psychological, excuse me, my cord's getting in my way. It's a psychological manipulation tactic, right? Where a narcissist or any toxic person really, in fact, sometimes it's done by people who aren't toxic, but we're focusing on toxic
Mhm.
people today. So they sort of cause you to doubt your own perception, right? They cause you um, to think they'll tell you reality isn't what it is, and they'll tell you this so much and so often that you start to believe it. For example, maybe they'll say nobody likes you, or everybody says this or that or the other thing, or they'll another example, let's say, I don't know, it's a lame one, but let's just do it. Let's say they said to you, hey, I'm going to do the dishes, so don't worry about it, I'll take care of it after dinner. And then after dinner they don't do the dishes, and you go, I thought you were going to do the dishes. And then they go, I never said that, why would I do the dishes? That's your job, or whatever. Little
Mhm.
things like that, and it gets way more serious than that, right? So those are a couple of mini examples. It gets a lot more serious in narcissistic abuse situations, where sometimes in my situation, it went so far as sometimes I would literally, let's say they would say, and this is not something anyone ever said, but let's say they would say, oh, you have a big stupid nose, you know,
Mhm.
and then I would go, you just said I had a big stupid nose. And they would go, I never said that. you know, little
Mhm.
things, little examples. But it really is, uh, it literally causes trauma because it is so consistent and persistent throughout the relationship. So sometimes it starts really early. Like I have one client who mentioned that it started basically the first day they were dating, where she went on a date with a guy, and who she ended up later in a relationship with for 3 years.
Mhm.
Anyway, she went on a date with him, and on the very first date, he took her to a place where he told her he had been with 3 or 4 of the waitresses that were there that night.
Mhm.
And then he brought his friend along, and she was being just polite to the friend, and including him in the conversation. And then she was accused of flirting with the friend. And then he took her out to his car and told her that his friend said she was too fat. And
Mhm.
then all these other horrible things, and then brought her back into the same place, and she was basically just completely destroyed, of course. And
Mhm.
so it ruined the whole evening for her, but and then a lot of other things. But it's pretty interesting how that goes. Anywho, so what about you? What do you think about
Yeah.
gaslighting?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's just that it's that erosion of another person's reality. And like you'd mentioned, it can happen in intentional ways and it can happen in unintentional ways. It can happen by toxic people, it can happen by well-intended people that really love and support us. Um, but at the end of the day, the result is kind of the same, and it's that erosion of a person's reality. And what that looks like in motion is a person really is left with struggling with trusting themselves and struggling with trusting their judgment, their perception of reality, their ability to kind of navigate life, their ability to trust other people, and um, and and people can experience, like Angie was given the examples. There's a wide variety of examples. uh, some other ones that come to my mind are with cheating. You see uh, a text message from, I don't know, your partner, somebody you don't know, like it's sending naked pictures or some sort of inappropriate text, right? And you confront your partner and they say, no, I don't know what you're talking about. There were no texts on my phone. You're just looking for a reason to be unhappy, or you're just looking for a reason to leave this relationship. Or um, um, again, denying something that you know happened. Um, on the more benign end, it can be telling well, I say this, but it's not, because it's all damaging. But uh, I guess what I mean by benign, like the more covert and that kind of really flies under the radar, it's telling another person, it's defining another person's reality for them. So uh, let's say something's a big deal. Oh, I was really sad. I failed my test, right? And another person says, oh, well, that's no big deal. And the message can be, oh, well, there's no reason for you to feel sad, right? So that those are some more subtle ways that it can happen. Or you're upset in a relationship about uh, I don't know, they got angry or or something, and you confront them like, oh, it was really that you got angry, like that was really not cool. And they're like, oh, what are you talking about? I wasn't that angry. um, I noticed recently that I have slipped into doing this. Obviously it's not intentional, but um, where I wasn't comfortable asserting myself in certain ways. And so I would either make little jokes, or I would deny how I was feeling.
Mm,
So if I was upset and my partner would ask me, are you upset? I'm like, no, 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 I'm not. It's like, well, really? Because everything else, your body language and everything else seems like you're upset. I'm like, no, no,
mhm,
no, I'm fine. And so it wasn't coming from a place of me trying to erode his reality, but it was still crazy making on his end, because it's like you're telling me one thing, but your body language and everything else is saying something different. And so again, that's some kind of on the more benign end, and something that I've had to work on slowing down and really realizing, okay, how am I feeling? And getting more comfortable with asserting myself in certain ways. But sometimes parents do this, um,
mm,
you know, unintentionally. The emotion thing, if your child's crying, they'll say, "Oh, it's okay, you're okay." It's a way of trying to comfort them, but then the result can be like, "Well, you don't really feel sad."
mhm,
And as we grow older, if we're experiencing that disconnect between what we're feeling and what we're experiencing and then what we're being told by other people, it can really knock us off base, and it can um, kind of make us second guess our own emotions, make us wonder, well, am I being overly emotional? My coworker says that they're not mad at me, but
right.
they're giving me the silent treatment. They're not talking to me. They're just being very kind of this icy atmosphere. And so they're saying one thing, but then they're doing another. And so I don't know, maybe it's me. Maybe I am making a big deal out of things. And after, being in a relationship like this, where it's ongoing, when a person gets out, I think this is one of the main things that people struggle with is, man, I don't trust myself. I don't trust my judgment. I don't trust other people. And I feel hyper vigilant and I don't know what to do about it.
Oh yeah.
Have you experienced that, Angie?
Absolutely. I still notice that if I sort of catch gaslighting directed at me or not, I tend to call it out now, which doesn't
Mm-hmm.
make people happy. But I'll just say gaslighting. What? But
Mm-hmm.
it's it's not it's very triggering, and definitely the hypervigilance is there. I've kind of gotten past that for the most part. I've kind of come to a point in my life where I just don't let that sounds weird. I don't generally let like a whole bunch of people in my inner circle. It's very small. And so people who aren't able to directly affect me, I try to just take them with a grain of salt in general. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Um, but people who directly affect me don't stay long if they're active gaslighters. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Um, it, because if it's like you said, like if it's unintentional, where I don't know that saying you're not upset when you are upset would be full on gaslighting, but I
Mhm,
have done similar things and I still do sometimes, if I'm being honest, because
mhm,
I think because when you are in toxic relationships for so long, you sort of learn to pick your battles. And so for me, things that annoy me, I'll just kind of push past them unless they're things that really affect me. You know what I mean? Like I
mhm,
have, yeah. So people usually know if I'm like, "Hey, this is not okay." They're usually like, "Oh, well, that's really not okay," because I rarely do that. You know what I mean? With that being said, there are people in my life who have probably gone too far. I think I'm off topic, but my, my
mhm,
point my point is, yes, I totally get how the hypervigilance thing happens. I see this with clients a lot,
mhm,
where they start to, and it happens to all of us, I think, at some point in recovery, where we start to go, "Oh my gosh, I'm surrounded by narcissists," right? And we start to notice that almost everyone that we're connected to on some level feels a little toxic. And then we have to, in my opinion, we have to sort of, when we start to see that, we have to really step back 3 or 4 steps and wait, because I think not just wait, but reevaluate more carefully, because there are some people who may have certain traits or may have certain issues, but if they're not able to directly, affect your life, then you just, I think, can reduce contact. But there are people, like I said, people notice. I noticed my parent first. And after noticing my parent, then I started to see other people around me. And
mhm.
and I sort of did did a little housekeeping over the years. So like I said,
Are you okay?
just dropped my toy, um,
Okay.
my little fidget toy. It's fine. Anyway, so like I said, I think it's a matter of having appropriate boundaries. But the hypervigilance thing is real. Sorry, I'm off topic. Go on.
Yeah, yeah, I agree, and um, what kind of what you said about the kind of denial of feelings. Huffle Mom was saying this too. She says, sometimes when someone insinuates that I'm angry, I say I'm not because I'm in denial.
Yeah.
I'm learning to admit when I'm angry, partly to take ownership and partly to take responsibility.
Powerful.
Absolutely. It's very well said, Huffle Mom. And
Yeah.
that's where I'm at. And um, too. So it's that's kind of the thing with that is like there's different levels of it and there's different intention behind it. Generally the term gaslighting refers to like that intentional
Hmm.
and kind of the intentional erosion of another person's reality so that another person can get their way.
Yes.
Like I'm going to continue making you doubt yourself so I can get whatever I'm going for.
Yeah. Well, and something you said and something Helpful Mom said really hit me. It was that, not being able to, I did go through a long, long time where I did not recognize my own feelings. And I would feel, but part of that is because often you're told by narcissists and other toxic people that you are thinking something or feeling something that you're not. And so you start to be like,
Mhm,
is this what I'm thinking and feeling? And I just don't know. And then on top of that, I found in my situation, in every situation, my emotions were not tolerated by anyone who was toxic in my life. And so anytime I had negative emotions, tears or anger or anything like that, irritation, I was instantly smacked down uh, on so many, in so many different ways. And so being in a position where your emotions are a reason for you to be punished, you definitely, I sort of just went numb. And initially, I thought this was a coping mechanism, and it can be, but that's why I say, with gray rock or whatever, I say be very careful because, yeah, you can do it, but if you do it forever, you're going to lose your ability to even be in touch with your own feelings. And as a result of
mhm,
that, when I started recovery, I literally was like, well, I'm good. Let's go forward now. Shove it all down. And then that didn't work out well for me, of course, because I ended up in this situation where I it sort of came back and bit me in the butt, all of the emotions. That was one of the biggest mistakes I made in recovery initially, was not allowing myself to feel my feelings. It's all connected. Anyway,
mhm.
you have a super chat, Dana.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Thank you. It's from Gary
Mhm.
Harris, who says, "Hi, Dana and Angie. How do we handle people who like to ghost others? I
Mhm.
feel like it's become very common in today's world. And should we call them out on it?"
Well, I'll start if that's okay with you.
Go for it. Mm-hmm.
So I honestly, I totally get why you want to call them out on it, but generally it doesn't do a whole lot of good in my experience to do that. It it's difficult. Personally, what I do, and I'm not saying I'm right, but what I do is if somebody ghosts me, I just let them.
Mm-hmm.
um, because generally that's not something that uh, ghosting someone is cruel and unfair, but it but if they feel the need to do that, then I just don't necessarily feel the need to run after them. Um, Now, I guess if I was in a relationship with someone for 25 years and then they ghosted me, it would be different. Then yes, I would call them out. You know what I mean? I think it just depends on the situation and the circumstances. Dana, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, that's very valid. That's very valid. It's one thing if you're dating, right?
Mhm.
Doing especially online dating. I think
Right.
ghosting and all kinds of stuff is very, very common with
Mhm.
online dating. But if it's somebody that you've been friends with for a while or
Right.
something else, yeah, that's probably worthy of a conversation.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, with online, and I like the idea of is, um, if it's somebody that you have a casual relationship with and they just kind of disappear, then kind of there's your answer.
Mhm.
And I wouldn't spend any more time or energy down that path because
Right.
they don't care.
Totally
So
agreed.
yeah,
Yep.
and um, yeah, it's difficult. Like again, especially with dating, it's really painful. At the end of the day, I think what a lot of it boils down to is people really have difficulty being assertive.
Mhm.
Assertiveness skills, they're not taught in school, and they're not practiced, and they're very kind of rarely role modeled. And so we all kind of twist ourselves into a pretzel to communicate in ways that we're comfortable with, and it tends to be ways that are passive aggressive, or aggressive.
Mhm.
And ghosting is more of that, I would say, passive, but it feels uh, passive aggressive,
Mhm.
you know?
Oh, really?
So
It does. Yeah, for sure.
yeah, 'cause it definitely hurts.
Mhm.
So yeah, I don't know. I,
I,
I sometimes, like, seeing behavior in others, it's just that realization. I would, at a minimum, I would encourage you to not internalize it,
yes.
to not make it about you, and realize that the behavior of other people, it's about them. It's about whatever they have going on with them.
Yep. No doubt. I just saw a comment from Joey, which was really good on this topic. I'm trying to see if I can, my chat scrolled. Oh yeah, Joey says, right, if they're ghosting you, they don't need to be in your life.
Hmm.
They are doing you a favor. When they come back around, be guarded, depending, of course, on the person and the connection. I totally agree.
Hmm.
I totally agree. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I do
Yep.
too. And here's a comment from Changing My Life,
Mm.
who's asking about the gaslighting. She says, but isn't it always intentional? Um, and I,
I look, I think it depends on the person. I think some people are that calculating, but I honestly, like we've talked before, Dana, about the
Mhm,
spectrum, right, of
mhm,
narcissism or whatever, and we all have a little bit, right? But
mhm,
when we get to the higher end of the spectrum, you're looking at definitely somebody who's more calculating. But those narcissists who are just sort of on the lower end, who are just kind of toxic, but they're not like psychopath or sociopath necessarily. They're just kind of they have traits and tendencies.
mhm,
Often those are learned in childhood, and they're often just almost instinctual. They don't even realize they're doing it sometimes, and so I think it just depends. What are your thoughts?
yeah, it might, you could maybe say it is intentional, but it's at a minimum, it's not always malicious.
There you go.
So, like, if like the example I was given about myself,
Hmm.
when my partner was asking, "Oh, are you upset?" I'm like, No, no, I'm fine."
Right.
Is I was in denial that I
Hmm.
was upset. So I was kind of having to work through all that stuff. I didn't feel comfortable sharing that with him. This is all hindsight, right? Okay. So I wasn't comfortable sharing that with him. And so at the time, it was sort of like, no, no, I'm fine. I'm fine. And then later on, I realized, no, actually, I'm not fine.
Hmm.
I am upset. And then kind of realizing, oh my gosh, yeah, I wasn't, oh, I was suppressing that myself. So it's a challenge because we can only meet other people to the extent that they've met themselves.
Mm.
So, like, in certain contexts, and we all have blind spots to our personality, right? So, like, this is one of mine. Now
Yep.
that it's not a blind spot anymore because I'm aware of it. But I wouldn't have been aware of it had my partner not said something.
That's really interesting what you just said about blind spots. I find that that's actually something I'm personally working on right now, is
Mhm.
is figuring out my blind spots, and it's not pretty, my friend. It's not pretty, but
Yeah.
I'm working on it. So, we all have. Well, my point is, no one's perfect, and as you go
Mhm.
through, I think as we go through recovery, it offers us that opportunity to really dig in and figure out who we are. And then where I'm at right now, I think past that point of initial recovery, obviously, but
Mhm.
uh, I'm at the point of like, okay, I know who I am, I know what I'm all about, but how do I look to other people? And I don't mean physically. I just mean how do other people perceive me as a person? You know what I mean? And so that's something I've been really trying to figure out and understand better, because I know there are things I need to improve about myself. You know what I mean? And so I find that really cool. Oh, another super chat, Dana.
Oh,
Um,
okay. Uh, this is from Couch Multiplayer. Says, "Hi, girls. When I was young, my mom used to say I would never make friends or never find a girlfriend due to my Asperger's. But as soon as I got older, every friend and
mm,
relationship I had, she'd try to destroy."
I have had a very similar experience. Not the part
Mm.
about the Asperger's, but the part about the mother trying to destroy the relationships. I would say that one of two things is happening. I don't know how multiplayer, if you are a female or a male. I do think that affects the situation and my answer. So I'll just say this. If you are a female, then there's probably some jealousy issues with her, and possibly possessiveness, but more
Mhm.
likely jealousy issues. If you are male, then possessiveness and maybe a fear of having you pulled away. Although if you were not a golden child and you were more of a scapegoat, then it would just be she doesn't think you're as good as she is, and she wants you to know on on a very surface level. But it sounds to me like she has some pretty major issues. Dana, what are your thoughts about this?
Yeah. Well, I think at a minimum, it's insecurity that's
Hmm.
coming from her end, and it's again that sounds uh, kind of like a blind spot that she's operating from.
Yep.
It's these are her own fears and her own concerns, and that there's I don't even know if I some sort of level of projection there,
Hmm.
and kind of
Invalidation.
coupled with a self-fulfilling well, not self-fulfilling, but her fulfilling that prophecy
Yeah.
of trying to destroy these different friendships.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
yeah, it's yeah,
Totally
very
agree.
very
Yep.
problematic.
Without question. Do you have another one for us?
Um,
I
I
do
d-
if you don't.
oh, go for it then.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. I've got a comment from Charles.
Mhm.
And he says, and this is regarding what we were talking about kind of going numb. Um, he said, I think in this position, we can go back in and out of numb, depressed states until we realize we feel that way and take measures to get back out and figure out what conditions prompt it. And I think that that is a really astute observation. I think something that I would add to that is if the word if, because sometimes people literally go their whole lives and never know. They never recognize. I've seen it more often than I would care to say. Um, but I think that those who do realize what's happening and figure out, oh my gosh, this is happening because of this person I'm in contact with or in relationship with of any sort, uh, and choose to take action to get better and to fix whatever the issue is, whether they choose to go no contact or reduce contact or whatever it is. Um, I think, like I was saying, I think those people become more enlightened or evolved in some ways than people who don't experience that in their lives. So that's one little silver lining to all of this.
Mhm.
Dana, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely.
indeed. Oh, and Peggy says, wait a minute, I just saw it. It just flew up on me. Okay, anyway, she said, I can't find it, but she said something about if people ghost her, she lets them ghost her. She's with me on that one. Anyway, um,
Yes, yes. Oh, here's her comment, I think, that you're talking
okay.
about. She says, "Yeah, same here. If someone wants to break contact, I need no explanation. They have their reasons. It
Yep,
might not even have anything to do with me."
that's right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. Yes. Okay. I'm scrolling back up because oh, there it is. Okay. I lost my spot. Do you have a comment for us? or a question?
Um, yeah, UNA also mentions kind of what I'm saying. She's like, but Dana, that's denial. That's not gaslighting. And that's, I would agree.
Yeah,
There's that line there,
right.
right?
It wasn't
Between like,
malicious on your
yeah,
part.
it's not
Yeah.
malicious and it's not, I wasn't consciously aware of it. It took me, several hours later and some self-reflection to realize, oh my gosh, no, that's exactly what I had been doing.
Hmm.
And I think the term gaslighting is kind of extended um, kind of into that. A lot of what we see, people getting caught for an affair and
Hmm.
them freaking out and denying it.
Or worse, blaming the other person, the
Yeah,
person they cheated on. I see that all the time.
yeah. The more traditional definition of gaslighting, it comes from the movie Gaslight, and I don't know if you guys have seen it, but it's the woman, she marries this con artist, and he's intentionally trying to make her question reality to the point of thinking that she's crazy so he can get her committed and out of the picture so he can figure, kind of do the rest of his crime. And I've experienced both. The challenge with this is it's really difficult to tell intention with other people. All we have to work off of is their actions,
That's right.
especially somebody does a great job of if you've gone through this several times where they've been caught, I don't know, stealing, cheating, doing whatever kind of heinous acts, and then they deny it and they pretend to be very remorseful, it can seem like, okay, well, they're just more, I don't know, I wouldn't say that they're necessarily in denial about it, but they're not, admitting to things. They're running from reality. But we don't know, like, it's hard to kind of assess somebody else, the intentions of another person.
Hmm.
Um, but it's still problematic. It's still problematic, even if, um, so, again, in my example, had my partner taken me at face value and said, okay, well, I guess there's not a problem. You're saying that there's not a problem. Um, my guess would be that he would have been left kind of with that ongoing introspection of, well, is there a problem? Isn't there a problem? Like things don't line up.
Right.
Right. And so over time, that would have caused him probably a lot of anxiety if I'd continued to do that, even though it wasn't intentional.
Yep.
And but the good thing about this is that he was comfortable enough to be assertive and to say, hey, this is what's going on. This is, can we talk about it? And I felt comfortable enough around him. And there was a lot of resistance on my end at first. I'm like, no, 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 no. I'm fine. I'm fine. It's no big deal. And then realized, okay, you know what? Actually, there is an issue and I would love to talk about it. And it was able to be discussed and resolved.
That is beautiful. I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
Healthy and good.
Yes. Yes.
Yes, it is a good thing. I have a couple of comments I want to share with you really quick.
Sure.
And they're both related. Jack Lumen says to Couch Multiplayer, how nasty of her about the mother who basically prevented this person from going and getting dates or whatever, or ruin
Mhm.
relationships. He said, but of course I believe it. It sounds to me, and this is what the part I wanted to bring out because it was much more eloquently put than what I said, but it's a similar thing. Sounds to me like she was trying to isolate you for her supply. And I think that's a big, valid point. And then Couch Multiplayer responded, yeah, it felt that way. While my dad was an overt narcissist, my mother always used to hide me from the outside world and pretend to be my savior. But as I got older, I realized she was a slippery covert. And I think that's a very, you know,
Mhm.
yeah, yeah, a
Yep.
very astute observation again.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
yeah.
And here's a comment from Joey. So spot on. He says, honestly, when you're very grounded, gaslighting doesn't work. You
Mm,
see what's going on right away. And for
yep.
me, it totally changes the way I see the person. I just don't have much respect for these individuals. And at a minimum, I definitely agree with that. When you're very grounded within yourself and your reality, you can you're able to hold on to that and you're not so easily swayed from it. And so
Mhm.
when somebody else, and it becomes very clear when somebody else is not in their reality, that they're denying how they're feeling or what things that they've said or whatnot, it's sort of like, no, I was there. I know what was said or
Right.
things aren't lining up. And I'm not going to internalize this or kind of make this question my perception. This is something that's going on with you.
Truth.
And that's a big part in terms of healing, is getting back in tune with our emotions, our thoughts and feelings and wants and needs, and all of that, and realizing, realizing that they're valid, that, that you feel how you feel, you know these kinds of things. So probably what I see the most of is people that are afraid that maybe they're the problem, that they're making too big of a deal out of something,
Hmm.
that they're overly emotional. And really, it's a result of chronic invalidation of their partner, or their partner who's going to great lengths to hide whatever they're up to, and then to deny it, and then, you know create all these lies as try I guess smoke screen
Hmm.
to try to cover it up, to throw the other person off their track. And um and I've shared this before, but one of the biggest kind of gifts I gave myself was deciding, I no more crazy making. Like, I don't do crazy making in relationships.
Yep.
And if something comes up and it's not making sense, like it like, we need to have a conversation pretty soon after, and it needs to get resolved, because that disconnect, that's where all that mental anguish and then anxiety comes from. And
Yep.
it's, yeah, it's corrosive.
For sure. I have a comment from Mistress, follow Mistress
Mhm.
Nurture. I've made the air of gaslighting when the reality that my friend perceived was painful, so I've provided a different narrative. The difference is, upon noticing, I corrected my course of action. And in this case, it almost sounds like you said something other than the truth in order to protect this person's feelings, which I'm not sure that I would characterize as gaslighting, because that shows empathy, but I don't know the whole story, so I'm just going to leave it at that. Dana, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think if we extend the kind of term of gaslighting to, it's that erosion of another person's reality. And
Hmm.
I think it really can, it's just as damaging if it's intentional or unintentional, malicious intent or benign intent.
Hmm.
It If another person buys into it, it slowly starts separating them from their thoughts and their feelings. Frankly, now that I'm saying it out loud, I would almost say that the more benign unintentional gaslighting is potentially even worse,
Mm.
because we're quicker to accept it as truth, because we trust this other person in so many other ways. um
Yeah.
like, oh, this person's really been consistent, so I'm there, what they say has more weight. And um I think at the end of the day, it's really about getting to know ourselves, and um learning to be assertive and getting in tune with ourselves, with our thoughts and feelings and wants and needs and all of that. And so we have to know ourselves in order to express ourselves. And if one of those is missing, or they're kind of, or if it's really fluctuating, it's really difficult to be open and honest and authentic
Hmm.
if there's parts of us that we're still running from.
All true.
So,
Very true. Okay. Let's see. There is something happening with Mystique in her child, um, being sick. I'm trying to see all the things.
okay, yeah.
Um, sorry. Do you have a comment for us? Uh, some kind of specialized testing was done to see if maybe they were being poisoned. Hmm. Okay, I'm not sure.
Mm,
Okay. Oh, I have one from Huffle Mom, and this is a good question. She says, the only gaslighting I know is say the narcissist did something and then says, no, I didn't do what they did when they did. Are there other ways to recognize gaslighting than just that? And I would say, yeah, it really has to do with just anytime they make you question your own reality, or they
mhm,
make you doubt yourself in your own perception, right? So like I was mentioning earlier, my ex and my mother actually severally used to tell me what I was feeling and thinking, and it was most of the time wrong. Sometimes they got it, but
mhm.
most of the time they were wrong. And that was one way they would sort of gaslight me in a way. And maybe they will make you tell, like they will say, everybody says this, that, or the other thing about you, or everybody
Mm,
agrees with me when I say this about you, that sort of thing. E- and a lot of other similar things. Dana, what are your thoughts on? Oh, we have another super chat. I don't know if you want to grab that first or.
okay. Let's see, sure. Couch Multiplayer says, I've watched a lot of narcissistic videos to educate myself, but one of the recent best ones I've seen was by Patrick Tehan titled, Was Your Other Parent Narcissistic Too? Here's 10 signs. He was describing life and my mom. Yeah, it's very validating. I think that's kind of the benefit of the internet, how, my goodness, thank goodness for technology, right?
Mm,
YouTube videos and social media and even books,
mhm,
just the availability of material that's out there that allows um, for people. Well, and hearing the experiences of other people, I think that's profoundly helpful. I think it's one of the reasons support groups can be so great is you're seeing um, different aspects of your own experience in the experiences of others. And it might, and what's really kind of wild is sometimes it might even be stuff that you never realized was an issue. And then you're
mhm,
reading about it from that third party perspective. And you're like, oh, that's a problem. I get that. Or somebody else has an issue with it and you start seeing it in a different light. It can be very, very illuminating. Um, with that. So I'm glad that you were able to get some of the validation that you were seeking.
mhm. Yeah, that's important stuff. Yep. And I think,
Mhm.
one of the things, I recently partnered with a psychologist, and one of the things that she, that I found was really helpful was, even she says you need to educate yourself about this if you're going through it. And so I found
Mhm.
that to be really powerful, because I always thought the same thing, but then I thought, well, I'm just kind of a nerd and I do a lot of research whenever I have a problem with anything. you know and because this particular issue affected my whole entire life and my whole entire being and self, because it started at birth basically with my
Mhm.
parent, it certainly was something I was interested in learning more about. So and I see that a lot of people do that. And for me personally, I just need to understand an issue to get through it personally on a
Mhm.
deeper level. So I think a lot of our fellow survivors do as well.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yep. I have
Let's
one from Bonnie if you don't have another one yet.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. She says, what to do when the narcissist gets flying monkeys into a gang? How do you come up against a gang? Um, and I would just say this, Bonnie, I would say people who are maliciously acting against you and they know what they're doing, they go on the no contact list as much as possible, or minimal contact if you have no choice. I know your personal situation, I think. Um, Also, I would say, in general, if somebody, if they're smearing you and talking bad about you, and somebody says to you, well, why would you do this or why would you do that? Then you just say, look, if you know me, you know I didn't do that thing. So, and then if they can't understand that, I mean, you can tell them your side of the story if they're worth that to you, if there's someone who deserves your thoughts and your feelings. Not everyone does. But
Mhm.
if there's someone who knows you well enough to know better, then you tell them that. And if they don't know better, then you just take steps back emotionally until you get through it, and then you figure out if they get to stay in your life or not. Personally, thoughts, Dana?
Yeah. Yeah. Um, yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, that's kind of all anybody can do,
Hmm.
in those types of situations.
Yep,
So,
no doubt. Okay, let's see
here's
here.
a comment from you and
Mhm.
A. It says, one thing that was always hard for me was I didn't want to be an uncaring or not nice, unempathetic person. I easily helped out and gave supply easily too. I can still be nice, but I no longer give supply.
Yeah, I think that's really common for us, especially when we were raised by these people as well,
Hmm.
because we're taught that our value comes from our ability to serve, or the things we can do for people, and we're not seen or heard in a positive way unless we're giving to the
Hmm.
narcissist. And so we, especially when our parents or one of our parents is that person, is that toxic person initially for us, then we literally learn the only way we get love is by serving these people. And so what we think that's how we become people pleasers, and as
Hmm.
I think Joey mentioned, yeah, the chronic invalidation will always create doubt. Well, that chronic invalidation also pushes us to become people pleasers, I think. So,
Hmm.
yep.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And um, I think that's a can be a very big turning point in a lot of people's healing is realizing that of, um, oh my gosh, I was using niceness to kind of
Hmm.
navigate uncomfortable situations, or I didn't know how to stand up for myself. So I thought the way to do it was I'll just be extra nice to this person. And
Hmm.
hopefully then they'll start being nice to me or they'll start respecting me. Or, um, but really it's kind of that niceness is a slippery slope into being boundaryless.
Hmm.
And uh, yeah, which is that oftentimes goes hand in hand with the people pleasing and like you said, kind of this getting value from the being in service to other people.
Absolutely agree.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is one from, oh, sorry, I'm just jumping on. Is
No,
it my
go
turn
for it.
yet?
Go for it.
Okay. This is one from Couch Multiplayer that says, Angie, we also as empaths try and fix our own selves. And then we try to meet the narcissist in the middle, but there is no middle. It's either their way or the highway. And I think that's really, really insightful because that's really true. It's true. I did that. I tried to fix myself. And then when I couldn't meet the narcissist in the middle because they wouldn't come over
Hmm.
there, I kept going toward them and trying harder to become acceptable or good enough or whatever. And the fact is, it narcissists don't ever find you completely good enough except for maybe in that initial love bombing phase or when they know you're about to leave them. That's about
Hmm.
it. Even though they really do appreciate what you do. Well, I don't know if appreciate is the word, but need maybe or
Hmm.
assume. Um, what's that word I'm looking for, Dana? Entitlement. They have entitlement, right? They have entitlement issues, so they think they're entitled to whatever you're doing for them. But as soon as you're not doing it anymore, then they notice, and really that's why they miss you, in my opinion. But yeah, I agree with you 100% on that.
Hmm.
Yeah. Any
Yep.
thoughts? Yeah.
Yep. And this can be one of the challenges too, is if we're continually thinking, okay, if I just change certain things about me, then I could somehow fix this relationship. If I can just be, I don't know, a better partner, a better person, I don't, closer to what they're looking for,
Right.
then they'll finally approve of me, and we'll have this great relationship.
Hmm.
But the reality is, oftentimes being more of what somebody else wants us to be involves erasing or silencing certain parts of ourselves.
Hmm.
So it's erasing or silencing who we need to be,
Yes.
we authentically are. And we might not realize that for several decades. And it's sort of like, oh my gosh, you kind of wake up one day and you're like, I am living a life of shoulds. I'm living a life that my mom thinks I should live. I'm living a life that maybe society thinks I should live, or that kind of this deep programming within me that I thought I should live, or the kind of person I should be. And then kind of like, wow, okay, I need to back up and kind of reevaluate and take a different approach because does not feel authentic to me at all.
Yeah. On a similar note, I found I just thought of another example of gaslighting
Okay.
that happened to me that I bet happens to a lot of people. When I was in my first marriage, my ex-husband, like I've never been super jealous as a person when it comes to people I was with, except with this person, and it started there. I mean, I continued to have some issues after that I've worked through, but uh, I never ever felt threatened by other people, but this person had issues, and their issues were causing me issues. So what if I would ask a question like, well, who's that person, or you know whatever, do, he would mention, oh, I think that she's hot or she's this or whatever, or he would just openly flirt with them right in front of me and stare at them. It was very difficult, and so I would ask questions, but instead of you know validating me and telling me, you don't have anything to worry about, whatever, he would say things like, well, there's a lot of women in the world. Why are you so threatened by everybody? Or why are you so jealous? God, I should just cheat on you already because you're accusing me, which I never
Yeah.
was. You know what I mean? And it became such an issue that I thought I was losing my mind. And I tried so hard to not act jealous that it made me feel insane, because then I became jealous, like really like in my head about it. And I think, but then he used that as a way to put me down and shove me into this little hole and make me feel completely worthless, and it's such a bigger issue than that. But I mean, that is something I think,
Mhm.
I became obsessed with. I still have to watch myself today, and, like, I watch people's eyes. Where do their eyes look all the people it's almost everybody that it's not intentional, but it's like a habit I developed with that person, many years ago, following his eyes to see what he was looking at, and it's such a it's almost embarrassing to talk about it, but he really did mess with my head in big
Mhm.
ways. So, yeah, anyway,
Yeah.
that was a thing.
Yeah. And I think kind of breaking free from that too, it involves understanding that it's okay
Mm.
for a person to have standards and deal breakers.
Yes,
Right.
yes.
So, like, that's what can be that's how they can kind of like worm their way in with stuff
Mhm.
like that is, oh, well, you're jealous. It's like, well, no, you're like staring at the waitress's butt every time she walks by.
Right, and
Like,
openly flirting and, like, yeah.
right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Like you're doing stuff that's not okay.
yeah,
But then they're trying to make you feel like, no, 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 this is okay. You're the one with the
right.
problem.
Yeah, this is normal.
Realizing, you know what, we all have standards and we
Right,
all different standards and different deal breakers.
right,
And if it's okay to have the standard of, I'm not okay with my partner ogling, every woman or every man that walks by,
right
or
in front of you.
right in front of
I
me,
mean,
especially right in front of me. But
right.
they're doing like inappropriate or being overly flirty online or stuff like that. If
Mhm.
you're not okay with it, then you're not okay with it. They don't
Right,
need to agree with you. It
right,
doesn't matter if their ex-girlfriend was totally okay with it,
right.
right? Um,
Mhm.
or if
Which
they
inevitably they'll say.
which right, right. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter even if you talk to your other friends and they're okay with it. It
Mhm.
doesn't matter. If it's not okay with you, then it's not okay. And so
Right,
being
that's right.
able to get grounded enough in ourselves to let them know, I'm not okay with this. So if you're going to continue, then I guess we're done here
Right.
because I'm not going to do this in my life. I don't like it.
Mhm.
And everybody
Absolutely.
has their own stuff that they do and don't like,
That's right.
you know.
That's right. And I think when it becomes an ongoing thing, I mean, because what happens with gaslighting is it's not often in this particular case, it was not something that happened like once. It was something that started once and then it became a thing. And
Mhm.
I mean, I got to the point that I didn't even like other people. Like I was so afraid of and it was partially I was feeling embarrassed about his behavior, but it was mostly that I felt threatened by it. Somehow I had this idea in my head that I don't know, I wasn't good enough. I mean, we all know about that, right? But but it was more than that. And it was like and like when I was pregnant with my oldest child, he literally made me feel like a monster. I mean,
Mm.
like a big fat pregnant monster.
Oh,
And
wow.
it went on and on. So I mean, and it was all sort of around that type of stuff too, because it was again, as my belly grows, my self-esteem went down. And it was not like that with my current husband. He was great about it. But in that first husband, he was horrible. So anyway, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, he
yeah,
sounds like it.
yeah. It was
There's so
ugly.
yeah, there's so many, and there's so many ways that we can kind of take that as truth, right? So like if you're pregnant and someone's like, "Oh, well, gosh, you sure have gained a lot of weight or you're sure big." You're like, "Well, I don't know. I mean, I guess I can't really argue with that. Like I am pregnant, like I have
I
gained
was very
weight. I am
pregnant.
right."
Yeah.
And but the reality is even if a person's gained a bunch of weight and they're pregnant, it still doesn't excuse somebody from tact and the way you approach somebody still matters. So
Mhm.
insulting them, even if it's some sort of, there's rooted to some degree in truth, isn't okay.
Yeah.
And that was something that took me a long time to realize too, because it was like, oh, well, I guess I just can't handle tough love, or I guess I just can't handle, the cold hard truth. And the reality is like, no, that's just a person being a jerk, and you
Mhm.
don't need to handle that. Like if there's ways that a person certain things don't need to be said and certain things definitely don't need to be said rudely. Like there's no need for that.
That's right. That's right. Um, oh, in fact, Changing My Life says, uh, Angie, you just reminded me of the emotional cheating, flirting he would do, complimenting people, and he'd never talk to me like that. Yes, I became jealous. She said, he kept saying it was nothing. Same, same. And that is something I experienced as well. And it was like he would talk about like have nice this sounds so stupid to say it out loud, but he would have like really nice, fun conversations with women who weren't me. And
Mm,
then he would be so mean and hateful to me, almost in the same breath sometimes. And I thought it was horrible. It was horrible. Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah.
Very bad. Yeah. Um,
Yeah, I think that's so common for people to get out of these kinds of relationships and wonder, well, who is the problem? Like, is it me or is it them? And
yeah.
I just don't know. And then there's all of this kind of fear of, well, what, gosh, well, what if I am the problem?
Oh, yeah.
And, are they going to go live happily ever after with somebody else?
Yes. I
Right.
always assumed I was the problem.
Hmm.
And therefore I tried, like I said, I kept trying to change myself, and to the point that I didn't even know who I was for a long time. And it wasn't until years later that I fully understood that it was not me.
Hmm.
It's crazy how that happens. It is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sarah Goodenough says, "How can I get closure without contact?" Um, with finding finding out and uncovering more and more shows me that my gut was right, but this is a sad excuse at true closure. How can I feel true closure without contact? So I'm just going to really quickly give you my favorite way to do that. I write a letter, and I have my clients do the same thing. Write a letter to that person, write every single thing you feel, everything you never got to say to them. Say all the bad words you want. I said a lot of cuss words in mine.
Hmm.
Um, whatever you need to say that you wish they would have heard, put it in a letter. At the end of the letter, you write, and now you can write this in your own words and however you choose to say. You might say the word release, you might say the word forgive. Now I release you and I let go of you because I no longer want your negative energy in my life. Peace be with you, or whatever you want to say, or F you, or whatever. And then you sign it. And then I ended up rewriting my first one because I was so hateful and mean in the first one. So I rewrote it, but I actually intended to send it when I wrote it the first time. After I rewrote it the second time, I did not need to send it. I was done. I felt better. So I burned it. And that
Hmm.
felt good too. So that's a lot of my clients have used that exercise very successfully. So that's something you could try. Dana, what are your thoughts?
Yeah. Yeah. I would agree. It's writing out that letter and, um,
Getting rid of all the stuff in the house
getting
too.
rid of all the stuff and
Mhm.
realizing too that releasing the I think the concept of closure is kind of a myth, and it's not an event, it's a process.
Mhm.
So it's more of releasing that anger, like that anger. I forget, there's somebody said this, like anger, it's when it's leaving your body, it's like a poison, but it
Mhm.
leaves bit by bit. And so realizing these feelings are still going to surface, the feelings of injustice, the feelings of anger, of hatred, of rage, of hurt, of all of it, it's going to continue to surface. But a big part of moving more towards, I guess, that like completion, maybe is a
Mhm.
better term than closure, but uh is is getting that out, of putting all of those thoughts onto paper. And it just kind of helps to organize it, um and to have it just be said, even though you're never going to send it to them. And here's the thing, I know there's this thought of, oh well, I need them, I want them to know how much they've hurt me, or I need an apology from them, or I just want answers or something. And I know that on like a logical level that makes sense, but the reality is any further communication with a person who's shown you that they're, especially if they're like a pathological liar, or they've lived a life of deceit and lies, you're probably not going to get the truth from them. It's just going to be a next level of manipulation.
Yeah.
So there is no there is none of the answers that you're seeking. So it's giving yourself, um, kind of that sense of closure and realizing I'm releasing this anger towards this person, uh, bit by bit, in my own time, in my own space, for me,
Mhm.
so I can move forward and live a good life. Because that's, I mean, God, there were so many times I would tell myself, like, the best revenge is the good life. And I had that,
Absolutely.
man, I leaned on that statement for a long time. And whenever I was, that anger, that sadness would start boiling up, I would remind myself the best revenge is a good life. And then I would get busy making that happen. If it meant cleaning out my car, organizing my junk drawer, balancing my checkbook, you name it, I'd start getting busy building up a good life.
Yes. Yeah. I I I think that is I don't think people understand the profoundness of that statement, Dana, because I didn't for a long time. I was like, "Oh yeah, that sounds like some cliche BS to me." But it's
Mm.
true. It's really true. When you get to that point where you can really truly Like, get into it and live that life. A- and recognize how good it feels to not be controlled and abused, and then to just let go of the need to know them. That's the best revenge. You don't need to do anything to them. You don't need to cause them any issues because they are their own issue. They will
Right.
never, you know what I mean? They
Yeah.
will never be truly happy and fulfilled because they cannot ever be satisfied because they are always so, y'all know who they are. And that when you start your own, well, here, as couch multiplayer says, closure without contact, me, just live your best life and move on. It hurts, especially when it's family, but it's something we all need to do if they don't love, appreciate, or respect you. But it doesn't feel to me when you get to that point where you're like, okay, I'm done. And you can, the anger for me, I use the anger to propel me forward.
Hmm.
When I wrote that letter, it was the first time I wrote that letter, because I've written it for a few people over the years. The first time I wrote that letter, I was so angry. And the reason that I wrote the letter is because I think I've told this story. I'll just tell it really quick. I was sitting in my apartment after I had gone through a really bad experience with a friend, not a romantic partner, but a roommate. I was just so angry because I'm very traumatized by some things that occurred in that situation. And I had moved out, everything was fine. I had a great apartment, I was happy, great job, everything was great, and I couldn't stop being angry all the time. And so one day I was sitting there going, "Why can't I stop being angry? I should be happy." And then this Liz sounds so crazy, but this voice, I heard a voice whisper in my ear almost audibly that said, "You have to forgive him." And I was so angry when I heard that voice. But I thought about it for a while, and then it came to me, I was going to write this letter to this person. This is the only way I could figure out how to get my feelings out without being in contact. So yeah, yeah. Anyway, but the good life thing is it's powerful and real, and the letter helps too.
Yeah. And I just wanted to add too, this isn't to say that, that we're advocating for people to not feel their feelings.
Not at all.
Right. What I have found personally is that there's kind of a time and place
Hmm.
for feeling feelings. And when a person, especially when you're first out and those feelings are just so overwhelming,
Hmm.
I didn't have the emotional bandwidth to kind of sit there, to sit in my feelings. And I also didn't have the luxury of sitting in my feelings. I had to work full time. Like I had
Hmm.
things that I had to function for. Um,
Same deal.
and so it's sort of like, okay, this is not the time for me to do this, because I'm afraid if I do this, I'm just going to fall apart. And so there was that period of kind of transmuting or sublimating those uncomfortable feelings into something
Mm.
positive. And then in time, when um, things were a little bit more calm in my life, and those feelings of the intensity kind of calmed down, then I was able to start actually working towards like processing those feelings.
Yep.
So uh, yeah.
I think that's powerful. Um, Joey mentions that something I was talking about. I don't know at which point. I'm sorry about that. Our chat is a little behind. We're probably about a minute ahead of what you guys are seeing. But he mentions, where did it go? Oh, kind of sounds like my father, and probably why I resent the guy. He's a narcissistic parent, and I was the scapegoat. So was I. I was also the scapegoat. Hey, how many of you in here were scapegoats? Let us know in the chat if you don't mind. Or were you the golden child or the lost child? Because even golden children can end up being, you know, victims are
Hmm.
victims in different ways. Whereas the scapegoat's never good enough. The golden child is always trying to uphold some false image the parent has given them, and it's a whole big mess. But I'm
Yeah.
just curious. Yeah. Anyway, Dana, would you think, were you an only child? No, you have a brother.
No, I have a brother.
Yeah,
I would
that's
say I
right.
was more the lost child.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I don't know
That,
if my brother was. I don't know. He had a run of it. He was kind of golden in some ways. uh, I don't know, more catered to, but
mm,
still, I don't know. He had ADD and dyslexia, and really had a lot of challenges, which
mm, a lot of attention.
he had a rough go of it. Yeah.
Mm, yep, I can see that. Let's see here. Bonnie says the letter works, burning, ripping up. It really works. It's awesome. Right on, girl.
Hmm.
Um, Couch multiplayer uses Tony Soprano's quote about my mom. She's dead to me. I love it. It's not funny to say that. I shouldn't laugh, but it's kind of funny. Tony Soprano. All right.
Yeah. Yeah, Holly says, yeah, process the feelings. We love them and hate them. Oh, this is in response to Kristen here. She says, how do you heal when your narcissistic spouse of 20 plus years passes away suddenly? I was planning on leaving a year prior, but never had. Then he passed away. I just have mixed feelings and I'm confused.
Well, it's a really hard thing. I would say, I mean, here's the thing.
Mhm.
Even when you leave a person and they still remain walking on the planet, you still have to grieve that person or the person you thought you were with. You're going to have to grieve your deceased husband. I'm sorry for your loss. Um, with that being said, I think it's okay to not be super sad about it. um, but I understand that there are social issues with trying to jump right back into life. And I say grieve where you need to. Work through your feelings. Be okay. I would suggest, maybe checking in with a grief group or a therapist or even a coach if you don't feel like you have any other mental health things you're dealing with, and work through it in the way that is most effective for you. Your feelings are definitely going to be mixed feelings, and I think just expressing them to someone who understands will be very helpful. I've actually had more than one client go through a very similar situation, where one of them, one person, they'd already just been served. They served the person with divorce papers, and like the next day, they got killed in a motorcycle accident. And
Mhm.
then there was various situations like that over the years, and it's shocking, but it's you just have to go through it. You have to grieve it as needed. I know one woman, the woman whose husband was killed with a motorcycle situation. She felt bad because she didn't feel bad.
Mm.
And I told her, you don't have to feel bad. I mean, you can be appropriately not smiley around their family or other people that don't understand, of course. I mean, you don't have to cry about it necessarily, but everybody's going to feel a little different. So it just depends on your particular situation. Dana, what are your thoughts?
Yeah. Well, I think this is the challenge with grief and something that people don't really talk about. There's this I think there's this idea that um, relationships, when somebody dies, that it's a 100% sad event,
Hmm.
right? And that's not the reality the vast majority of the time. Relationships, especially when there's some sort of abuse involved, they're complicated. Whether
Yes.
you're a significant other, a parent, a child, however that person was in your life, it's complicated.
Mm.
And um, and so it can there's a lot of feelings to work through.
Yeah.
And it's like Angie's saying, all those feelings are normal and you'll experience different ones and you might not experience other ones. And that's okay too.
Yeah. Don't beat yourself up for whatever you feel. Be okay with it.
Right.
Self compassion is real important. Sorry,
Mm-hmm.
Dana. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
I have a comment from Be Real, which is like totally on point for me. Closure is absolutely a myth. It's internal, not external, and it cannot be gotten from a person. 100%. And that's why the letter works in the first place. You cannot
Mm-hmm.
get closure, especially from a narcissist. They want the door to stay open because, who knows? They might need supply again in the near future, or distant future. I 100% agree with that comment. Thoughts, Dana?
Mm-hmm. Yep. And because and I love that.
Mhm.
And because closure, um, it's a process. It's not an event. Sometimes it's going to take multiple letters,
Mhm. Yes, yes. And
you
that's
know,
okay.
and that's
Yeah.
okay. And I think that's probably more normal than
Hmm.
not. So
Yeah.
as things are coming up, writing them down of, there's something else on my mind that I just wanted you to know. Um, I'm like, kind of X, Y, and Z event. This really upset me. I can't believe you disappointed and so hurt. Um, and now um, I'm choosing to work towards releasing this event. So the anger and the hurt that I have towards this, so I can move forward and live a good life.
Yep. 100%.
Yeah.
Um, I have one from, wait, do you have another one for us?
No, no, go for it.
Okay. From Couch to Multiplayer, it says, "It's crazy that we all want from our family of that all we want from our family of origin is mutual love, support, respect, and understanding, etc. But when you are living a better life than them and you try to help them, they aren't happy." That's all true. But you know what? That's the thing. When you go through something like this, um, that's exactly, you can't help people who don't want to be helped, I think is what it comes down to. You can't. I mean, I've tried a lot, you know, and some
Mhm.
people just don't, they don't want help. They don't want it, or they don't see a problem. They think they're totally fine the way they are, or they think you're trying, like if it's a financial thing and you're trying to help them financially, then they're offended because what do you think, you're better than me? you
Mhm.
know? So yeah, I get it. Thoughts, Dana?
Yeah, what was the question again?
With with wanting support, respect, and love, but when you're living a better life than them and you try to help them, they're not happy.
Oh,
Your
yeah.
family members.
Yep. Yep. It's
Yeah.
it's one of those things. I
Yep.
think it's maybe readjusting our expectations of our relationships with them, um,
Mhm.
and yeah, and kind of our own actions towards them. Like, okay, if I'm going to do something that's nice or kind, or you know, give a gift or whatever, realizing that, or releasing any expectation that this is somehow going to
Yeah.
make them feel a certain way, or that they're going to treat us differently. It's, I'm just doing this thing to do this thing, and then
Mhm.
releasing it because, um, well, I think that's kind of a healthy way to do it anyhow. But it helps to realize, like, we have very limited control in situations like that,
Yes.
with people like that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
No doubt. Yep. Let's
Let's
see
see.
here.
I've got one.
Oh,
BB Scott makes the comment. He says detachment is a huge concept and lesson in all of this. And
yes.
yes, mhm,
It's difficult for sure, right?
it is. I will say, in my own life, the way that I applied that was not internalizing the behavior of others, and instead seeing it as limitations. And when I was able to see it as limitations, it really set me free, because
Oh
it
yeah,
wasn't personal anymore. Because it's not personal to begin with. It didn't start with you. It's not going to end with you.
that's right. I actually had a very similar
Mhm.
experience, and it wasn't really until about, I don't know what, how long, about 10 years ago that I really, or maybe 8 years ago, that I really realized that it wasn't me, it was them. That it was about
Mm.
the fact that they were, yeah, they were the issue, and that it was what it limitations. I even it almost felt sorry for them when I realized that. Almost.
Mhm.
you know, when I realized it was with my mother, I think that I realized at first that literally her own personality issues caused her to be incapable of seeing outside of her own head in a way. And that made me feel a little sad for her. But just a little, and only for a minute. you know.
Mhm.
Anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. I think when you realize, okay, this is how this person handles it, this is kind of their limitation, it takes away all of that. Oh, well, could I have done something different? And maybe if I was, I don't know, prettier or nicer or more patient or more loving or better in bed or whatever, that I could have somehow changed the core, I could have somehow earned their love. Right. And realizing, no, this is where their limitations are.
No doubt.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. Oh, Dana, I just realized we're 8 minutes over. I'm so sorry. I
Oh,
lost
that's
track.
okay. Yes, we are.
Yep. Do you have any other ones you want to pull out before we get ready? I'm trying to see.
Well,
I have
here's
one.
one from Bill.
Yep.
He says, I'm dealing with this closure issue. My female narcissist discarded me and did not say why she ghosted me after being hot and heavy for over a year. It's seriously wounding to my soul. Any advice?
That's a hard one. If you're not able to get in touch with her um, to discuss it, which I'm guessing you're not, I mean, being hot and heavy for a year and then just ghosting, that's pretty crappy.
Mhm.
I think it is about, I think the letter might help, writing the letter. I think setting your mind on the idea that you don't want her back, even if she comes back, which I know seems impossible at the moment, but getting to that place where you can just be done, I think is huge. Um, I think going from the perspective of someone who, you know, if you do it once, if she ghosts you once, I mean, if it's for like a, she falls off the planet for 24 hours, that's one thing. But if she's been gone weeks, months, whatever, you have to come to terms with the fact that she has done this and for God knows what reason. Um, but I'm sure it wasn't your fault. And I'm sure, I mean, I assume not based on what you said. Um, I would say just try the letter, try to get rid of all the things in your home that make you think of her if you can, or at least some of them, or rearrange or whatever you need to do. I don't know the whole story, and I'm so sorry. Big hugs to you, my friend. Thoughts, Dana?
Yeah.
He said he's
Yeah.
devastated.
Well, yeah. I mean, that would be absolutely emotionally devastating.
Yeah,
I guess kind of realizing it kind of back to her
weeks.
behavior is a reflection of her. It's not a
Yes.
reflection of you. That's an incredibly insensitive and painful way for a person to end a relationship.
Mhm.
Um, and then kind of realizing, it's regardless of what her reasons were, there really isn't a relationship possible with somebody who can't communicate effectively and who can't um who kind of is so okay with just tossing something aside and then moving forward with no explanation, no nothing.
Very
So
disrespectful. Yeah.
yeah, sometimes when we see the limits of others and we realize, okay, I can't have this in my life either, like this isn't going to work for us. It's incredibly painful, but it also can be kind of freeing in a way of, okay, this is not workable. And maybe I thought it was before, but now I realize this is just absolutely not workable. This is um, way over the top kind of deal breaker behavior. And
Mhm.
so yeah, it's going to take some time, and it's absolutely reasonable and appropriate and understandable to nurse those hurt feelings.
Yeah, and it helps to talk to someone who
Mhm.
understands. So if you haven't joined a support group, you might do that. Might get a therapist, a coach, a friend that understands. Anybody like that. I have found many clients have come through my virtual office
Mhm.
with similar situations, and sometimes just talking it out and doing simple exercises can make a huge difference. It's a
Yeah.
process. I do this one thing, it's like I call it a grief weekend. I don't know, I just made it up, but anyway, I do talk to people 4 to 6 times a day during the weekend and walk them through steps to sort of let go and move forward. And it's a process, and depending on where you're at in the process is what we work on. But it's very helpful. And talk to someone and keep doing what you're
Mhm.
doing as far as coming into chats like this, join a support group, get connected, do your research like Dana mentioned. And yeah, you'll get through it, my friend. You're not by yourself. You're not alone. I mean, right
Yeah.
now, 72 people sitting here with us who have been through something similar. So please know you're not
Mhm.
alone.
Yeah,
Yep.
absolutely. Well, I think with that said, let's go ahead and wrap up for today. Thank you guys so much for being here. Thank you for your questions. Mod Squad, you guys are awesome. Very much appreciate you.
Appreciate you, Mod Squad. Yes,
And Angie, thank you so much for being here.
my
Um,
pleasure.
yeah,
Thanks for
yeah,
having me.
oh, yeah, of course. And so next week, you guys will be over on Angie's channel. So Angie Atkinson over on YouTube, across the internet. And again, if you'd like to be notified when we go live, you can subscribe to both of our YouTube channels, and or you can text the words Angie Live, all one word, to the number 33222, or and or Dana Live, all one word, to the number 22999.
Yes.
So yeah.